I'm pregnant at 16 with a married man. My name is Alice, and my life is a never-ending move. Not because I love traveling, but because my family has no other choice. We move from city to city, change schools, friends disappear as fast as the houses we live in. My mom works as a nurse, my dad as a security guard. Money is always in short supply, and there are 3 children, an older sister, a younger brother, and me. Grandma is retired, she helps, but it's hard for her as it is. I was used to almost everything in our lives being built on credit. When I needed to buy something, like clothes for school or some other things that I could wear with pride, I took out a loan. After all, if we didn't buy, we simply wouldn't have time to prepare. And at my age, it was important not to be among those who were always behind. Dad and Mom argued a lot, and 2 years after we moved to a new town, they divorced. When my sister told me, I couldn't hold back my tears. I didn't understand how it could happen, because I thought that a family should be strong, and then everything fell apart. But at some point I realized that Mom wasn't tired of Dad, or anything like that. She was just sick of it. She was tired of living with the constant lack of money, of having to work 2 or 3 jobs, and the household chores were her worries too. Now my dad lives in another city. We hardly communicate, although he helps with money from time to time. But it's still not enough. I don't remember how many times I had to change schools. By the time I was in 9th grade, it was 6 times. I didn't have any friends who would stay with me forever. And if someone did show up, we still said goodbye. They're discussing new phones and lipsticks, while I'm just repeating my homework. This is my only chance to get out of this life, which is like an endless struggle for survival. My plans for the future are clear. I want to become a policeman. It's prestigious. It will give me a job right after college. It's like I've got my life mapped out 10 years in advance. And then, in all this chaos, I met him. I didn't pay attention to him at first. He was 10 years older than me. He had his own life. And I, as always, was focused on my studies. But he couldn't pass by. He tried to get to know me, sent me flowers, invited me to a restaurant. At first, it seemed kind of weird. Why would I want to do all that? But Logan was persistent. His generosity attracted attention. He gave me gifts, took me bowling, bought me everything I could possibly want. At first, I didn't think it was love, but every day I felt something important in my life change. He said he had everything: money, job, opportunities. But somehow, in his words, I sensed a strange bitterness that he was hiding. I couldn't understand what was behind this man who was walking so confidently and calmly through life. When I first saw Logan, I didn't even think he would be a part of my life. He drove to school in an expensive car, and it immediately drew attention. I was standing on the sidewalk with my friends, and they were already discussing who this guy was. The girls were whispering as they looked at him, and I felt everyone's eyes on me as Logan pulled up right in front of us. He was tall with a confident gait, wearing a stylish suit, and there was something unusual in his eyes, something not found in our world. Logan was a couple years older than me, and of course we had nothing in common in terms of school and activities, but somehow he managed to capture my attention. I don't know what his power was, but he found me among all the others. At first I just laughed, thinking he was flirting. I was only focused on my studies and didn't think about guys. And guys like him, with expensive cars and suits, were definitely not for me. But Logan didn't leave me alone. He kept surprising me. He started giving me gifts, roses, some expensive things that I couldn't even imagine. At first I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to react. In our world, with constant moving and living on the edge of survival, such things seem impossible, out of touch with reality. And he was just buying me things for no reason, taking me to restaurants. It was so unusual that I didn't even immediately realize what I felt for him. Then, when he offered me a new phone, I said yes. I didn't know how to say no, and I couldn't resist what he was giving me. I felt more and more like my life was starting to change. Maybe I didn't love him at that moment, but I felt special, like I was part of some other world, a world I had always dreamed of, but didn't believe existed. Logan not only gave gifts, but he became a part of my world. We started spending more time together, at the movies, bowling, even just walking in the park. At some point, I realized that I didn't need anyone else but him. He filled my life with something vivid and real, but something told me that this world couldn't be so perfect. It was too beautiful, too carefree. And though I tried to turn a blind eye, I was beginning to feel more and more that there was something behind it that I didn't know. As each day passed, I became more and more infatuated with Logan. He was perfect, at least in the way he acted around me. He always knew how to surprise me, how to make me smile. He was attentive, easy to be with, and I was beginning to believe that things would be real with him, that his feelings for me were genuine. But there was one problem. Logan was hiding too much from me. I noticed for myself that his conversations with someone on the phone often flared up, and when I asked who it was, at that point, I didn't pay much attention to it. In my mind, it was just him and his attention to me. When I noticed he had a ring on his ring finger, I almost didn't pay attention. Logan seemed so open, and there was no hint in his words that he might be involved with anyone. And then, I found out the truth. It happened completely by accident. He and I were walking down the street when I saw a woman walk up to Logan and, kissing him on the cheek, said, "Don't forget to pick up Emma from school." She looked a little confused, and Logan, noticing my glance, immediately started making excuses that it was just an acquaintance he was working with. But I noticed how her gaze was full of anticipation, like she was important to him. At first, I didn't realize what that meant. After all, at that point, Logan had always told me he didn't have a girlfriend. I approached him about it. That's when Logan admitted to me that he was married and had a little girl. I felt the ground go from under my feet. I wanted to cry, to scream, but he kept saying that it didn't matter, that he would decide for himself who to be with. He promised that everything would change soon, that he and his wife were no longer living as a family, and divorce was only a matter of time. But I felt like something was wrong. I didn't know what to do with this information, how to feel about Logan. I mean, he still said he loved me, but how could I trust a man who hid things like that? What was I supposed to do now? I wanted to believe in him, but there was something in my soul that wouldn't let me live. When I learned the truth about Logan, I didn't know how to react. Everything around me started to fall apart. I was so much in love with him that even the thought of his wife and daughter seemed like part of some other world, like it didn't concern me. He said they hadn't been together for a long time, that he wasn't happy in that marriage. And I tried to believe him, to believe that the future he was painting for us was really possible. But this truth, like a knife in my heart, still couldn't help but affect me. I started to think more about my feelings, about what I really wanted. It was getting more complicated than I thought. One evening, when Logan and I were sitting in a cafe talking about life, I felt that something was wrong. I couldn't explain it, but there was a worry inside me, and that uneasiness turned out to be true. The next day, I felt strangely sick, dizzy, tired. I chalked it up to overwork. But then, I realized it might not just be fatigue. I bought a pregnancy test. At one point, as I sat on the toilet eagerly awaiting the result, I felt the ground go out from under my feet. When I saw the 2 stripes, I was so scared that I couldn't even breathe. How could this have happened? Why now, when everything seemed so complicated and uncertain? That day, I tried to put everything together in my head. Everything seemed terribly ridiculous and unbelievable. All I wanted was a normal life, stability, something I had never had before. I wanted to get away from poverty, from constant hardship. But now I was pregnant, and I was faced with a whole new choice. When I told Logan, he was of course shocked, but first he said that everything would be okay. He promised that we'd be okay, that we'd have everything we'd ever dreamed of. But I began to doubt more and more that this was true. I was afraid he was just saying what I wanted to hear to make me feel better. He was divorced, had a lot of unresolved issues with him, and I wasn't sure we could get through it all together. I felt that no matter how much I wanted to believe in miracles, reality was still cruel. I didn't know what to do next. After all, things had become so serious now that decisions had to be real steps, not just feelings. After I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. My thoughts were constantly preoccupied with the future, and I couldn't shake that feeling of anxiety. On the surface, Logan kept telling me that everything was going to be okay, that we would make it through this. But I wasn't as sure of him as I used to be. I was scared. Once in this new reality, I began to notice more and more problems that I hadn't seen before. Logan said it was only a matter of time before he and his wife divorced, and that she had already filed for divorce. But I couldn't believe it would be that simple. I tried to imagine being with him, that we would start a new family, but my fears overpowered me. He continued to be in contact with his ex-wife, dealing with issues related to their daughter. I realized that she wouldn't just let him go. They had a shared history, shared children, and that bonded them much stronger than I could have imagined. Logan, on the other hand, didn't see a problem with him continuing to communicate with Katrina, his ex-wife. He said he wasn't a couple anymore, that he wasn't interested in her. But I sensed something was wrong. He and I started fighting, even though it had seemed so simple before. He kept saying he wasn't going back to her, that I was more important to him. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was just a temporary substitute. I started asking myself questions that hadn't even occurred to me before. What if he comes back to her when his life stabilizes? What if my role in his life wasn't as important as I thought it would be? Logan told me the divorce would be a long process, because he and Katya couldn't agree on custody of their daughter. But I had a hard time believing that this divorce was really coming anytime soon. I felt my inner struggle begin. I wanted to believe that Logan would still be there for me, despite everything. But every word he said was starting to sound less and less certain, and I couldn't ignore the fact that he was still in a relationship with Katya, even if it was on a different level. With that came new problems. Logan offered to let me stay with him, promising me that we'd start a new life. But more and more I felt his words becoming empty promises. He seemed to care about me, but I could see the doubt in his eyes more and more. He tried to tell me that everything would be okay, that we'd get through this, but I found it hard to believe him, especially since he was still talking to Katya. One day, after another conversation, Logan suggested I take a break. He said he needed time to get all of his divorce issues resolved. I felt my heart begin to clench. I knew this could mean the end for us. He said he didn't want to lose me. But how can you be with a man who is truly unsure of what he wants? I didn't know what to do. My dreams of stability, of a future with Logan, were crumbling right before my eyes. I thought I had to figure something out. But when the moment of the breakup came, I realized that I wasn't going anywhere, that I couldn't just leave him. After all, even if he wasn't perfect, he was still the support I'd dreamed of for so long. But what next? After Logan and I started living together, I thought everything was going to be fine. I felt like a queen, and every day with him brought new surprises. But as time went on, I began to realize that life with Logan wasn't all gifts and parties. He wasn't the man I'd envisioned, and it seemed like our relationship was starting to lose its magic. My pregnancy was becoming more and more real, and every day I realized that this was not just an adventure. It was a new life full of responsibility. And the more I realized that Logan wasn't ready for this change, he kept going to the nightclub and working, but all his money went to entertainment. He wasn't earning anything stable, and although his mom continued to help us with money, it wasn't enough. We had to move to a cheaper apartment, and I increasingly felt like I was drowning in the situation. As a pregnant woman, I didn't know how to deal with this chaos. I was having a hard time. Logan seemed to be clueless about what it was like to be a real man who took care of his family. Every day was an ordeal. I tried to talk to him, to discuss how we would live in the future, how we would prepare for the baby, but he kept withdrawing into himself. He didn't want to get a normal job. He didn't want to take responsibility for us. All his thoughts were only about clubs, friends, and entertainment. I could feel the tension building up inside me. My whole life, my whole situation, seemed more and more difficult, and no matter how hard I tried to explain to him that I needed his support, Logan continued to live in his own world, unprepared for our future. Our fights became more and more frequent. I couldn't bear to see him spending money on things we didn't need when we didn't even have money for food and medicine for the baby. I felt like all my dreams of a future together were starting to crumble. All I wanted was support, stability, and certainty about the future. But Logan couldn't or wouldn't understand that all of that was important to us. I didn't know what to do next. I began to feel that my relationship with Logan was no longer a joyful one, that it was becoming more and more difficult. He continued to pull away from me, not understanding what it was like to be in a relationship with a woman who expected him to take real steps, not just words. And even though I still loved him, I increasingly felt that I couldn't go on living like this. I decided to talk to him about it. We sat down, and I told him bluntly that I couldn't hide my feelings anymore. I was tired of empty promises and of his increasingly irresponsible behavior. He sat in silence, not knowing what to say. I didn't know what to do anymore. Leave him or walk away? Breaking up with him meant I would be alone, and there was no telling what would happen to our child. But when I tried to imagine how I would live without him, I realized that maybe this was the moment when I had to make a choice. Leave or stay, but with something new. With the fact that I get to decide what my future will look like. As time passed, I realized that nothing would happen if I waited for Logan to change. He and I drifted further and further apart, and though I continued to love him, the realization that I couldn't continue living in such constant tension came naturally. I could no longer depend on his promises and unreliability. Afraid of losing the most important person in my life, I was losing myself. One night, when Logan got lost in his club nights again and left me alone with thoughts of our future, I made a decision. I couldn't sit around anymore, waiting, hoping things would work themselves out. I felt that my life was at a point of change, and I had to take it into my own hands. I talked to Logan about how we needed to change our lives. We had to move to a new city, away from the routine and the constant problems. I couldn't stand the constant fighting, the scandals, and the atmosphere that was destroying us more and more. I needed something new, something clean, where I could start over. And Logan, though he wasn't really ready for such a change, agreed. Barnaul became our new home. We found a small apartment, and I hoped that this would be the beginning of a new life. The move was not easy, but I felt that there was something important in this step. No acquaintances, no Logan's family, or his ex-wife. We could start fresh. I didn't know how our lives would work out in the new place, but I felt like maybe this was a chance for both of us. Logan said he would try to find a job and I decided to give him another chance. We both needed a reboot, and it was the only thing I could do to give us both a chance at a fresh start. However, in Barnaul, we faced reality. Time passed, and finances became catastrophically short. Logan, despite all his promises, never got a job. We were living on the last of our money, and all those dreams of a new beginning began to crumble. It was like starting to repeat an old story, only in a different city. My life, despite my best efforts, remained on the brink. But I could not give up. The baby that was about to be born reminded me that I could not continue to live my life waiting for miracles. I had to take action. In that moment, when I felt my strength drying up, I realized that the most important thing wasn't Logan, his problems, or his mom. The most important thing was me and my baby. I had to give myself a chance at a new life. And if Logan couldn't be a part of it, then I had to move on without him. I decided to talk to him. I told him that we couldn't go on living like this, that we had to find a solution and build a real life, not dream of fairy tales. I told him that if he wants to be with us, he has to start taking action and not just hope for his mother's help. We can't live on someone else's dime all the time. Our conversations began to return to this topic more and more often. I couldn't take it anymore, and I realized that if Logan wasn't ready to change something in his life, I couldn't keep waiting. So I made my choice. We decided that Logan would look for a job, and I would start on my own, not relying on him. We moved, but there was a new road ahead of us, and I had to be prepared for it to be rough. However, despite all the trials, I felt that if we fought, we had a chance for the future. I knew a new phase had begun, and this phase was full of uncertainty, but I was ready for it.